Hi, welcome to Everyday NLP Bites, Season 3. And this season I've called In Conversation With. My name is Florence Madden. I'm an NLP trainer and coach based in Cumbria in the north of England. I'm also the author of The Intention Impact Conundrum and the co-author of Everyday NLP. So my conversations in this series of podcasts are with people who have an interest in NLP, perhaps people who have trained in NLP for their own purposes or maybe specifically for work purposes, and also people who are NLP trainers or coaches who use NLP in their work. And I'm asking all of them the same question. What's been the concept in NLP that has meant the most to them? And most crucially still, what impact has that had on their life and work? So I'm delighted this week to welcome Mike Rawlins. Mike and I go back a long way, 10 years he tells me. I'm sure he'll probably say more about that. Mike is a coach through his business 6 Inches to the Right, and he is also a leadership trainer, and he's very big in Poland. So more about Mike later. Anyway, Mike, over to you. What's been important to you in NLP, and how has that impacted on your life and work?
Thank you, Florence. Can I just add to your description that as well as being a coach and a trainer, I'm a dog owner. And I say that because that may become apparent at some point in the conversation if the postman goes past. And I apologise for that if it does. Right, it's a really big question, Florence. I thought long and hard about that when you asked me to come on this series, and it soon became apparent there was one obvious response. And it takes us back the 10 years to when we first met on a course that you were training me on, which, although it wasn't an NLP course, had lots of elements of NLP in it. And one of those elements was a model called the Neurological Levels of Change. It's a model proposed by Robert Dilts. Now, in that instance, it was associated with an exercise we were doing on removing limiting beliefs. And we'll talk a little bit more about beliefs in a minute, I guess. But it's a model that goes much wider than that. And I think it's fair to say that that model is probably responsible for the fact we're having this conversation today, because much of what I do now and how I am stems from the thoughts and the processes and the behaviors that model released. Now, I guess it's probably worth me just saying a bit about the model, because I guess some people watching this video may not know what the model is. Put very simple, imagine an iceberg. Okay, now I see you have a lovely view of, is that old water? It looks very familiar.
Yes, it's specifically for you, Mike. It's the view from Leeming House, which is a view that I know you particularly like. So the background is especially for you today.
Well, thank you so much for that. Yes. So we have the waters of old water. Now, I guess they haven't seen for several thousand years any icebergs, but let's imagine for a moment.
And the rest.
If there was an iceberg in old water, we would see it. But actually, what we would be seeing would be just a small part of the iceberg. Most of it would be under the surface. And the logical levels model is often presented using that metaphor. And put simply, what it says is, if I'm looking at you now, okay, I'm looking at you smiling and nodding, and I'm noticing the background that you have chosen to surround yourself within Zoom. And that's really all I can know about you, what you're doing in this moment, and how where you've placed yourself and how. And so all of the interactions we have, everything I say to you, everything I do with you, will be guided by what I deduce from what I see and where you are. Now, there's a lot going on below the surface. Why you choose to put yourself where you do and how you behave is driven by a number of things. The first thing, of course, is you need some skills and capabilities. Obviously, there are Zoom skills. How do I make this background appear behind me? At which you seem remarkably proficient. And there are interpersonal skills as well. So how you make a connection with people, the smiling, the nodding, all the things you're doing now to encourage me and make me feel welcome and comfortable. how do you acquire those skills? Well, you learn them, and you sometimes they are forced upon you. I have a feeling that Zoom may have been a skill that was forced upon you, Florence. Others you acquire naturally, or you choose to do because they're associated with something that interests you. So the skills and capabilities support you doing what you do, and that's true of us in everyday life. You know, whether it's going to the supermarket or going, I was about to say going to the pub. What's that? Um, but it supports us in everyday life. Why you choose those skills depends upon what's important to you, um, your values, those things that matter to you. You tend to choose to be skillful and to do things in areas that matter to you as a person. And those values are also associated with things that you believe, that you know to be true. So values and beliefs. So those values and beliefs sit below on the iceberg, the skills and capabilities. So above the surface, we have where you are, what you're doing. Below the surface, we have the skills and capabilities, and below those things you know to be true, those things you hold to be important. And yet there are more layers. Those values and beliefs really come from your sense of who you are, your identity. I would imagine one of your identities is Florence the coach. There's a new identity, Florence the communicator or Florence the marketer, maybe emerging here. And that sense of who we are it's deeper in the model, and it drives a lot of what we do and how we are in the world. There's a layer below that, which is how you then connect into the system. Why am I here? What's my purpose? How do I fit into society? It's almost a spiritual level, if you like. And that's the really deepest level that makes us who we are and drives how we behave. So what's the relevance? Sorry, okay, you can ask a question.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so go back to the iceberg, and just for people watching or listening who may be familiar with the logical or neurological levels model, it's often presented, or more often presented, as a triangle and the other way around. I have to say I present it as an iceberg because it makes sense to me that way, and I'm delighted that's something that you've picked up on. And the reason I think it does work so well is just as you've said, what people can see is our behavior and the environment that we're in. What they don't see, but can only guess at, are the skills that sit below that, the beliefs that sit below that, the identity and the purpose, how people see themselves.
Yeah.
So of course, what people believe comes out very strongly in how they behave. So someone might have the skill to do something, but if they don't have confidence, believe in themselves, they may not use that. Or if they don't think, they may have a skill that they don't think is worthwhile, and they may not use it. So but we see the tip of the iceberg.
We do, and I mean it's the way you presented it to me first, and it stuck with me. And yes, I've seen it the other way around. Again, it just makes sense to me because it's the stuff that's hidden. And of course, well, how is that relevant? Well, it's relevant for me in lots of ways. It's relevant personally because that awareness started me thinking about, well, what are my skills and what are my values and beliefs and who am I? And so it started a process of personal change that's brought me to where I am today. But it's also relevant in my work as a coach because I find it to be probably the go-to tool that I have when I'm working with people. And I find often I'm working at the values and beliefs or the identity level. And I'm not sure whether that's the kind of people I end up coaching who are drawn to me have things that they need to address at those levels, or whether that's just where I naturally go. But that's how it works anyway.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say, just saying that as a coach, that skills and capabilities are relatively easy to learn. You mentioned about me learning to use Zoom. Zoom's not nuclear physics. And yet, what might stop somebody, what actually concerned me at the start was, I suppose, a doubt, a belief level of, oh gosh, am I going to be able to get my head around this? Am I going to be able to work with this and in this?
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think as coaches, we tend to work much more at values and beliefs level, and even sometimes at identity level, I say, skills are relatively easy to acquire.
Yeah.
It's the confidence and the belief and the value that really is what drives people to learn something to start with, or keeps them going.
The deeper you go, the more powerful it becomes, but it's obviously more difficult to get to because it's deeper. The very trivial level, just making people aware that there's a surface, is often a really powerful change, and to make them aware that when they're interacting with others or when they're thinking about themselves, that actually there's more to it, starts the process. I have a couple of examples, one, my own personal change, and one with somebody I was coaching in a work context. The work context one was somebody I was working with for some time who I knew very well, very, very capable, but really not in work. Outside of work, she was immensely powerful, but in work, not so much. And we've been working at values and beliefs for some considerable time and making some progress. And then one day on a train, I got lucky and just asked her the question, who are you when you go to work? And that was all it took. But it was the identity level, so it was a much more powerful question. And that began a process that resulted in some amazing changes for her. And for me, it's, the identity. First of all, it was beliefs. It was believing in myself. And I'm going to take an example of me. I love music, and I write songs now, and I teach songwriting as well as all the other stuff, and I play open mics. But for like most of my life, music was something that other people did, a belief, and it was becoming aware of that belief first of all, and in the long process of challenging that belief that brought me into a really rich and fruitful area. And the moment when I could say to myself, I am a musician, which is an identity statement, was a hugely emotional moment and a mark that a change had happened. So, I think it's a great model. I go with it because it worked for me, and it's the one model in NLP above all others that I feel is me. It's kind of part of my identity actually, and that's why I use it.
Mike, I'm curious, what changed your belief or your identity that moved you from somebody that liked music to somebody who now sees himself as, I almost said magician there, maybe that's the same thing, musician?
I have been, you may notice my hair's, I've been doing this since December. It's not lockdown.
It's very lockdown bohemian, yeah.
Yeah. My sons referred to me as windswept Merlin the other day, so maybe I am a magician. What changed? Well, I'm glad we're doing the 18-hour podcast then, because it's a long story. Lots of things. It was a process, and it's first of all, it's about recognizing the limiting beliefs, starting to change them, noticing what happens, a process of accepting. So there are other things that are going on as well, other techniques that you can bring in, but it's about paying attention and then accepting that what's happening is real.
So was there a moment that you could point to where your belief about yourself changed?
Yeah, I guess there was one. You and I have had conversations in the past about unconscious mind, and I quite like my unconscious mind. My unconscious mind. Actually, I say I'm a songwriter. I'm not. My unconscious mind is. I just write down the words. I very early on in my process of learning to play the guitar, I used to go down to the local pub, which was a reasonably welcoming environment, and you do 3 songs. And I was there one night. I'd done 2 songs, which had gone pretty well, and I had a very complicated one lined up. I thought, no, don't do that. Just do an easy one. And I think I said I was going to play 8 Days a Week by the Beatles, which has 4 chords in it and about 8 lines of lyric. So what could possibly go wrong? And I stood up and said, this is 8 days a week, and then forgot all the chords and all the words. And just did what I normally do and just ploughed on, made something up, played some of the chords in not necessarily the right order, improvised things like 8 days a week is not enough to learn this song, and we all had a good time and a good laugh. And I was driving home. My unconscious mind sits just behind my left shoulder and talks to me from there. And as I was driving, it said, "Did you notice something there, Mike?" And so I went, "What's that then?" And my unconscious mind said, did you notice when you felt most powerful, most aware, and most alive? And I went, it's the point when it was all going wrong, wasn't it? And he went, yeah. And I went, well, it's okay then, isn't it? And it was that realization that actually didn't matter what happened, I could deal with it. And that's the point, I think, when things flip. Now, that wasn't the moment when I thought I'm a musician, but it was the change. And it wasn't long after that I started to accept that identity into myself.
It just, I love hearing that story. I just think it's so interesting. In this case, the feedback came from yourself, the realization of what you'd actually done. And sometimes it's feedback from other people. Of course, there's often times when we don't necessarily choose to listen to the feedback that other people give us, even though it might be incredibly useful to us. But just by listening to that feedback, in this case, from yourself, the beliefs started to change. And that seems to be something then that allowed you to use the skills and capabilities that you've got, to use them to their fullest extent. And therefore, I'm guessing from that, then the behavior that you've been showing to the outside world from a musical point of view has changed.
Well, it changed a belief. It changed a belief which was, if you get it wrong, it's a disaster, to actually it doesn't matter. And also a belief which was, this is what you enjoy doing, why not do it?
Yeah.
So those two beliefs started to interact with all the other beliefs and things, and they had a little conversation and sorted themselves out, and out of that came a new way of being. It's not simple, but I come back to the fact that the model just feels intuitively right to me. It's one I use a lot when I'm coaching, and it makes sense of my world.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I'm drawn to it.
Yeah, everything is around beliefs, and it's okay having skills and capabilities, but if you haven't got the confidence, if you haven't got that belief in yourself, then we often hold back on fully using our skills or capabilities. And as you were speaking, you brought something to mind. A couple of years ago, I was privileged to do a course with John Brinder, who, as you know, was one of the co-creators of NLP. And John's a very talented guy in many ways, and he was doing some, I'm not sure what the word is, you'll know this as a musician, but he was doing some work, shall we say, with Herb Alpert, the jazz musician. And I say work, I think John was, I can't remember what instrument John was playing. And he commented to Herb that he was a bit concerned in this esteemed company that he was going to get things wrong. And Herb said to him, John, the only mistake that you can make is to stop playing. And that was the thing that for him just switched that belief. Do you know what? It's about keeping on and having a go, and moved away from that fear of failure. And your story just kind of reminded me of that. And that applies to all of us, doesn't it? Whether we've got musical talent or not, that sometimes we hold back because we don't have that belief in ourselves.
That's correct, and that's absolutely true. I mean, myself and my friends who, let's say are adequately talented musicians, but we make mistakes. But there's a saying that says a wrong note played nervously is a wrong note played with confidence is jazz. So if you come to our open mics and somebody goes tremendous, it will just somebody will look up and just go jazz, and it's fine. And the belief changes it. It's suddenly it's okay.
Yeah. There's something about the permission that we give ourselves.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you for sharing that, and well, kind of just remind me of where our friendship started. And for people that are interested to know more about what you do, how do they contact you?
So I've set up a little company for myself called 6 Inches to the Right, which by the way comes from a song that I wrote 3 or 4 years ago, which was the first song that I wrote where the voice in my head said, that's good. So it was another landmark moment. And that's 6 inches to the right with a number 2 rather than the words 2. You can get me on my Facebook page, which is 6 Inches to the Right Coaching. At some point very shortly, there will be 6inches-to-the-right.com if I ever get around to finishing it, where you'll be able to see what I do. And if anyone's interested in the music, there's also a Facebook page called Blue Bottom Music.
Okay.
And then finally, I'm all over LinkedIn as well, especially with lots of Polish connections there. We're very busy over there at the moment, and so there are any number of posts in Polish with my name on them.
All right. Okay. Well, yeah. Maybe some people will read that, and maybe some people not. So for people watching or listening, the essentials of Mike's contact information, I'll put into the blurb that goes with this video or this podcast, so that you can contact Mike. And if all else fails, you can contact Mike through me as well. So thank you to Mike. Enjoyed our trip through all our yesterdays on that, and hope we do something together again soon. Next time round, I'm going to be speaking to Katie Wood-Ruddock. Apologies, Katie, for stumbling over your name there. And she's going to be talking about cause and effect. So thank you for joining Mike and I today, and hope to see you next week when Katie will be with me. Bye for now.